welcome to Autistically Unapologetic, the unfiltered and unmasked podcast about everything autism. Here's your host, Devin Morrissey.
Hi, and welcome to Autistically Unapologetic with me, Devin Morrissey. I would like to officially welcome you all to episode 25, where today I will be continuing the discussion of autism in the entertainment industry. Now, autism has begun to play a more pivotal role in front of the camera, but what a lot of you out there may not know is just how important autism is playing behind the scenes as well. Now, I had the privilege of meeting my next guest 2 years ago when I shot for my second season with a little show called Love on the Spectrum, where she serves in helping with casting for the Emmy award-winning docuseries. She has also been blazing her own trail to promoting more inclusion in the entertainment industry and has also been working with other nonprofit organizations to make sure that she's not the last autistic person to make her mark in this tightly closed industry. I'm delighted to have her on today's episode to talk about her journey and share some fun behind-the-scenes stories that you may have not heard until now. Please welcome to Autistically Unapologetic, Chelsea Darnell. Chelsea, welcome.
Hi, Devin. Thank you for having me.
Listen, it is so good to have you on. I have to tell you, I really admire your journey that you have had in terms of being an autistic woman and really kind of forging your own path in an industry that has its doors usually pretty close tight. And I'm really excited to be talking about a show where we actually have the opportunity to meet, as well as some of the work that you have done in the autism world. So if you're ready, we'll just literally jump right into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Chelsea, when I have a guest on my podcast, I always like to start at the very beginning of the journey. So my first question to you, Chelsea, is when were you first diagnosed autistic? When did you find out that you were autistic? And what was your reaction to all of it?
So I was diagnosed with autism when I was around 3 years old, but I wasn't made aware of my diagnosis until I was in my teens. And that was because I knew about my OCD in middle school, but I didn't know about my autism for a very long time because I think they wanted me to be Chelsea for a while, if that makes any sense. Yes. But the OCD I found out about first because that was the most pressing thing in middle school. And then in high school, I started to suspect that I was on the spectrum as well. And then my parents explained to me like, oh yeah, you're on the spectrum. So I was diagnosed when I was really little and I got like the services. I just didn't know that it was because I was on the spectrum. I kind of just had these people around me and I never questioned it as a kid. And then it wasn't until I was older. And it was ultimately it's about being ready to hear it. It was one of those things that I had to be ready to hear it. And I had already been quite involved with the disability community by the time I had found out about my diagnosis. I was volunteering because my high school required community service projects, and I was volunteering with people with developmental disabilities already. So I was already starting to suspect that like I had something, and then that's when I found out. And then when I did find out, I started to learn as much about my community as I could, if that makes any sense.
Wow. That is absolutely incredible. I feel like we share kind of similar backgrounds in terms of, I guess, finding out about our diagnosis. We literally found out about our autism literally at the same age, believe it or not. But we didn't really find out until much later in life, because I think for quite a bit of our childhood, we were just asked to just be our regular kid selves.
And the funny thing is, though, everybody else knew I had something. So what happened was in school, so I had classroom aides all of my life, and they are my dear friends who help me to this day. And everybody knew my classroom mates. Everybody knew that I had help. Everybody knew that I was a little different from the other kids. I never questioned any of it growing up until I was older. I just knew, I knew I was like different, but like I was in an environment where it's like, I went to small schools my whole life, so they all knew me. They knew my classroom mates. They would go to my classroom mates for like, actually, they're more than just that. They're my family friends who would help me in the classroom. They helped me throughout all of my schooling, even college. And like all of my friends knew about them, and they knew I was different, but I had all the help, and it was very obvious to everybody else that I was different. But I don't think I went to environments where eccentricities were kind of, normal. So it was a very different thing, if that makes any sense.
It does actually. And I think that what you talk about is so important. And actually, speaking of growing up, I'm actually kind of curious to know. Tell me just a little bit about your childhood growing up autistic. What was that like for you?
That's the funny thing. I think I had these people helping me out in class,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh, I never thought about why I had them. I was like, oh, they're there. But I did know that I seem to have more trouble in certain subjects, or
Mm-hmm.
like I was good at like English and stuff. And I mean, a lot of people are good at math, but I seem to be really struggling with it. I think by middle school, it started to catch on
Mm-hmm.
that I wasn't getting as many of the social cues as everybody else
Mm.
was. But I still had really good friends in middle school. It wasn't that I didn't have friends. It was that I don't think I realized I was comparing myself in a way that I shouldn't have because
Yes.
they were neurotypical and I wasn't.
Oh my goodness. Comparing as an autistic person is one of the worst things that we can do to ourselves because when you think about it, you're constantly having to evaluate yourself when you are surrounded by every other neurotypical person out there. And it can be extremely difficult, especially when you're a teenager, you're going through puberty and you're trying to figure out who you are as a person, but then add on top of it a disability that you never really knew what it was until you were told about it. What got you interested in working in the entertainment industry? Was it a particular show or character that inspired you? And how were you able to use your inspirations to get into an industry that has its doors usually closed pretty tight?
I guess really what it comes down to is I actually grew up around the industry because my parents both worked in it. And my dad worked on, when I was in elementary school, my dad was working on American Idol. Um,
Whoa.
and I would go on set every week. I
Wow.
would go on Wednesdays and Thursdays. I'd say hi to the contestants. I'd run around the green room and backstage. So I grew up around I grew up around that environment. So it's an environment that I'm actually quite used to because
Wow.
I was exposed to it at such a young age, if that makes
Wow.
any sense.
That's incredible. So you were always there for those heartfelt performances, but then those really cringe-worthy and shocking eliminations on
You
American
know
Idol.
what's
Because
funny
back
though?
in the
Half of the
day, they were so
I know. You
controversial.
know what's funny though? Half of the time, I was just running around backstage saying hi to the crew. That was like my big thing. Or if there was like a celebrity there, I'd be like, I have to meet them. That was my big thing.
Oh, right, because back in its early days of American Idol, when it was
Yeah,
so
they'd have
popular,
huge people. Yeah.
yeah, I think I remember at one point they had Mariah Carey on, they had Tony Bennett, Diana Ross. I mean, the lineup back then was pretty
I know.
wild in terms of
It's
celebrity
crazy.
guests. So you grew up in the industry pretty much because your dad was so involved with American Idol.
Yeah, and he was at the
Wow.
time he was running the reality television department at Fox. That was his job. And then in like 2013, he ended up transferring to Warner Brothers. He actually recently left that job as well, but he had a similar position at Warner Brothers that he did at Fox. And so I'd go on the Warner Brothers lot too, like in high school and stuff like that. So I was always around sets. I was always around crew people. I have a different view of the industry because I grew up with it so much.
Wow. And it's pretty interesting when you think about it now, when you look back, because there were so many things that you saw, just even from the crew. You're like, hey, maybe if I hold on to this bit of information and I can save that for later on in life. And look where you're at now. It's pretty
Thank
remarkable when
you.
the Ed Asner Center is a nonprofit organization that offers a wide range of programs and serves as a resource for individuals with special needs and their families. What got you started working with the Ed Asner Center, and how did their mission and work impact you?
So the center is created by Nava and Matt Asner. They're a married couple. I've known Nava since I was a little kid because I went to school with all of her children.
Wow.
And so that's how I know her. And as I was getting more involved in the autism community and I had caught wind of the Ed Asner Center, I ended up reconnecting with her. Volunteering a little bit. But I would say my heavy involvement really started during the pandemic. I had created this thing called Movie Chat. And it was basically the concept was it was almost like a book club, but for movies. And
Ooh.
to this day, it still exists on Zoom. I don't run it anymore. My friend Hannah does.
Mm.
But I that's one of the big for like what that's one of the biggest things I did at the center was help create that movie chat, and it's been going on for the last 5 years. And then my position there is social as a social director. I also
Hmm.
help teach like the improv classes there and stuff like that.
So you were pretty much on your toes over there. And what I love that you just brought up is so important. Using the connections that you know. It is not a bad thing to do in any industry. If you know someone in an industry that you're trying to get in, use those people to what you know to help you get into an industry. Because what's so amazing is that you knew Mrs. Asner from all of her children that you went to school with this, which is amazing. And now you've been with them literally for the last 5 years since COVID, which is absolutely
Yeah,
amazing.
and actually I was with them longer than that, but during COVID was when I like really became like, my most involved and like with like the center. But recently I just started I'm now getting paid for what I do there as
Hmm.
of recently, so that's really cool.
Oh, that's fantastic. And the best part is that not only what you're doing, what you love, but you're getting paid for it too, which is so important. People, employers, and clients need to be note of this that autistic people can work a regular job and earn money at the same time. Get it to your heads, employers and clients. Come on. In addition to your work with the Ed Asner Center, it should also be noted that you work with Spectrum Laboratory, which is another nonprofit organization that empowers and educates the autism and neurodiverse community. You are currently an assistant instructor over there. And my question to you about Spec Labs is, what made you want to give back to the autism community through instruction?
That's a really good question. So my time at Spec Labs actually began sort of as a student, but I was hoping to like be sort of a volunteer, but also a student. It's always interesting when I go into an autism organization because I'm a person on the spectrum, but I'm also
Yes.
very used to being a volunteer, if that makes
Hmm.
any sense. And so I joined and I've had a lot of fun with them. And I was really hoping, I've always wanted to like teach improv to like neurodivergent people. And now I get to do it. And so I help with two classes. I help with the improv sketch class, and the short film class. So that's really cool.
Wow. So you literally are helping instruct two classes literally within that organization, correct?
Yeah, and it's like I don't necessarily like I'm not necessarily the one doing all like the speeches, but I what my really my position is I'm there to help if people need it, which is exactly what I want to be doing.
Yes. And that is so important too, like when you think about it, because everyone needs someone to uplift them or, help them out, especially when you're doing something like improv. I do not think that people realize like improv may look easy, but for a neurodiverse or autistic person like the both of us, it could be one of the most nerve-wracking things on the planet because
Yeah.
you're putting yourself in a situation where you're supposed to act out anything random on the spot. And they're like, okay, actually, you're like, I don't know what to say or to
Yeah.
do.
And it's funny, so I've been doing improv since I was a little kid. So I did an acting program for years. And everyone was neurotypical. And I absolutely loved it. And so I had been doing improv for a very long time by the time I had joined Spec Labs. I even did in 2017 I did a workshop at Second City in Los Angeles, which I found out recently no longer exists. So, but yeah, I was doing improv for quite some time and I wanted to be able to pass that on in a neurodiverse environment. And actually, that's kind of what I did in high school. I volunteered at a theater program, but most of the students at that one had Down syndrome, and they're an amazing community, by the way.
Yes. One of
But
the
I wanted
greatest.
to do that same thing, but in the autism world. And now I get to be paid for it, which is really cool.
It's awesome. It's awesome. And I love what you mentioned about how like you've worked with not just the autism community, but you also work with the Down syndrome community as well, which is another important part of the neurodiverse community. It should be noted about that. Now you've taken on a bigger role in your career as
That's
you
right.
have now become a casting associate producer for the mega hit Emmy award-winning docuseries Love on the Spectrum. How were you approached to be a part of the show but behind the scenes?
So here's the thing. If it weren't for the work that I do with nonprofits, I would not have my Love on the Spectrum job. Because what happened was, It was like at the Ed Asner Center, Sean, who's the main producer, Sean and
Yes.
Kian's the creator.
Mm-hmm.
They both came to visit the Ed Asner Center. Maybe it was just Sean, I can't remember. But either way, they visited the center. They met me because I was social director. At the time, that was a volunteer position.
Mm-hmm.
But then, they met me, and they were, I think, actually thinking of me as a possible person to be on the show. But I was very clear I was not comfortable being on camera, but I said I would work
Yeah.
for them. And by some miracle, I was able to get the job. And I've been working for them since season 2, and it's been really, really great.
That's pretty crazy of just how fast literally the last year can just roll by so fast. And what's interesting is because for the very first season of the show, the entire production team were not scouting for talent like they have been now. The reality is that this was going to be an experiment to bring Love on the Spectrum from Australia into the US. And there were a lot of shoes to fill, just given how well beloved the Australian version of the show was. And it's interesting because I think that a lot of people forget now that Love on the Spectrum originated in Australia. And when you think about it, there would really be no Abby or David without Jimmy or Sharnay. There'd be no Connor or Tanner without Mr. A plus Michael. You know, there would be no Sabode without Mark. It's really important for people to remember that. I want to say that the show has really gone from maybe scouting for talent, you know, maybe in just certain local areas through social media to now thousands and thousands and thousands of auditions and applicants that want to be on the show. It really is mind-boggling when you think of just how much the show has, I like to say, sort of exploded from that very first season that I was on. And I had shot season 1 during literally when we were just coming out of COVID. And now it's become this massive show that everyone talks about, like, oh my God, I want to be a part of it. And you actually get to play a part of the casting, which is super incredible. So for those of you that didn't really understand what we were just talking about, Chelsea and I had met through Love on the Spectrum, where I had the honor of being a supporting cast member on the first 2 seasons of the show. We met at a Western restaurant in Los Angeles for a scene that sadly never made the final cut of the show, but a friendship was born through shooting that scene on that day. What was it like during your first season, or season 2, having to say in who should be casted for the show?
You know what's funny is that, like, I think during season 2, like, I wasn't really sure what they were going to have me do. Were they going to have me advise? Were they going to have me do? What I was not expecting was the level of recruitment that I was going to do, which is so cool that I get to do it. But basically, the one thing that's super important to my job that I never knew that I would ever be good at, but I've improved at it, is geography. Geography is hugely important to my job, because what happens is let's say there's someone from Boston, right?
Yes.
And I have to look up and depending on where someone lives in Boston, I'm like, okay, what about, I have to think about, where is this organization in relation to where this person lives? I think about all of that when I do my research.
That's pretty incredible. And when you were helping with casting for your very first season, which was the second season, did any of your suggestions ever make it onto air?
You know what's funny is that a lot of the things that I contributed that ended up on the show kind of happened by accident, it didn't necessarily happen that season. It maybe happened the next season. So, for example, Madison happened because I was doing research on the Boston area, and at the time, and I found a nonprofit, and she was one of the people interviewed from that nonprofit. And at the time, she was living in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And then sometime later, they followed up with her. And, obviously, as everyone knows, she lives in Tampa now.
She moved to Florida,
yeah. Through filming with her. But technically, that was through my research. The other one that is through me, but also is kind of was Callie, who appears in season 3. So so Tanner's date, the one that he goes on several dates with.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, she has curly hair. She's Southern, real Southern. Callie, I had seen in a video series called SBSK. They interview people.
Really? That series?
And so I had brought up Callie to the crew that same year during season 2. But at the time, I think she had she had a boyfriend. But then somehow they found out that, like, I don't know, then it ended up that she was, single again. So they were able to use her for season 3, which is really cool.
It's incredible when you think about, as you mentioned, they may not be the right fit for the season now, but they could possibly be a good fit for future seasons. And had Madison already been cast, she wouldn't have found her boyfriend on season 3.
She would not have met Tyler.
Yeah. So it's really amazing when you think about how just the stars all align. It's funny, I remember meeting you that first time, more than 2 years ago when you think of it, because even though the show for the second season premiered, I think like the first month of 2024, we shot literally maybe 10 months before the show even started. And it was funny because we met and you said you were coming from The Office and this and that. And mind you that I was just on the show to support a friend at that time, but I had shot numerous times that season because Kian had told me straight up, we need to borrow you for a couple of months to shoot. And I was just like, okay, I work full time, but I could work something out. And I'm just thankful that you showed up that day to that really weird Western bar with the bear skin on the ceiling, because I did not notice that until I turned around and I was like, Lord help me, I hope this bear is not intruding in this conversation because it is creepy. So we can officially confirm now, since Northern Pictures has already decided to beat us to the chase, Love on the Spectrum has been renewed for season 4, and I hear that you are coming back to help with casting once again. Is that correct?
That is correct. I've been helping with season 4. This is like my 3rd month as of this year. Like, I've been working on for a little bit. I know for certain that they're in the process of filming. They're in the process of casting. But I can't like actually say what's going on because because of the stuff you have to sign.
NDA agreements. We've both signed them before. We know how it works. But tell me what a day in the life of a casting associate producer looks like for you. And what should applicants that want to be on the show know ahead of time before auditioning? Because obviously there's thousands of them that want to audition for the show. It's beyond mind-boggling.
The one thing a person that wants to be on the show can expect is actually what you were mentioning before, which is even if you don't make it on the show that year, there's a chance they could save you for later. And don't feel bad if you don't get in, because thousands of people apply and only maybe 7 get in each year.
Absolutely.
It always comes down to the wire. And a typical day at the office, so I go in there as of yet. So I do like one day in person. I go to Venice, and then I do the other days remote. But basically, they have me say they'll tell me, oh, why don't you look in these 2 areas, and then basically I'll look for organizations, and then I'll reach out to them, via email, and then hope they get back, and then they do, and then those organizations provide the people. It all depends what they're looking for. Sometimes they don't even have me search. Sometimes it's not always about autism nonprofits. Sometimes it's things people wouldn't think to look, like, geek clubs, or, like just random things that you wouldn't think you would find people, but you actually would. I also try to reach out to college organizations, college clubs. There's like all kinds of stuff. So it's like, even if you think you've run out of everything, there's always something.
Exactly. And something that I think that a lot of people have been saying lately, and especially stuff that I've seen on social media, people think that Love on the Spectrum is the only way for an autistic person to find love.
Oh my God, no!
There are, just because...
The only way!
Yeah, just because Love on the Spectrum has been successful with certain couples, like when you think about it, Abby and David, they've had Connor and his new girlfriend, they've had Madison and Tyler. It's not just the only way to find love. There are so many great apps out there that are now for autistic-related people. A lot of things that we see on the show, you can use for outside. I mean, I used a dating app to now find my girlfriend of the past 4 years, and I couldn't have been more happier.
But I'm surprised that many people think. I had heard someone at the Ed Asner Center, they thought the same thing, which I thought was really odd. And I didn't realize that many people think that that's the only way to find love on the spectrum is to go on the show. I find that so strange. Really, I would just say they're good matchmakers. They're darn good matchmakers as well.
They are.
But the truth is, like, just like anything else, it's all luck of the draw. It doesn't always like
Yes.
some of the people, it took a couple of years to, find that person. Like that perfect
Yes.
match does not always happen right away, not even for the show. I would tell people that watch the show, it's supposed to be an example of how people on the spectrum may have a dating situation, but it's not the
Exactly.
only way to find someone, if that makes any sense.
Exactly. It is just a snippet or a door peek open to what the dating life or what the relationship world could look like for autistic people. And speaking of that, there's a really funny story that revolves around one of the newest cast members of season 3, Perry. We had the chance to meet her sister Teal, and there's actually a really funny story about how you tried to get Teal to be on the show.
Oh yeah,
Could you please share this funny story with us, as you had no idea that her sister was already
Teal.
casted for
Yeah,
season
so
3?
what happened was is that for those who watched the show, you may remember that Perry has a sister named Teal who she FaceTimes, and the mother mentions that they're both on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And Teal I had met at this, like, it was sort of like this. I was at like one of these like speed. It was almost, they said it was like geek speed dating, but it was more like speed friending, I think. But I met Teal there. And like we bonded over both being on the spectrum and we exchanged numbers. And then I was recommending her to the producer, thinking she'd be really good for the show. And then he tells me, he goes, "Oh, is it Teal Kim?" I'm like, "Yes." And then he goes, "Oh yeah, that's Perry's sister." I'm like, "What?"
Ah! What are the odds that that would have happened? Like,
Yeah, and they're not good either because Perry lives in Boston and Teal was living here. Like there was no reason they
yes.
should have been, sisters, but they are.
Yeah, I think it would have been really cool if both the sisters were on the show, because then you would have seen something that Love on the Spectrum necessarily hasn't done yet in its entire franchise. When you have two autistic sisters that are finding their own love at the same time, I feel like that would have been
Yeah.
a really good catch.
I think that would have been really good. They just live on separate coasts, so it's complicated.
They do, and a lot of people honestly think like, oh, can autistic people or like that are related to each other, can they live on opposite coasts? Yes, they can. Look at Teal and Pari, for example. It's not even funny. So my last question for you, Chelsea, is this. Even though the entertainment industry is starting to open its doors to more neurodiverse and autistic talent, there is still a long way to go. Now, what do you wish to say to the entertainment industry in terms of being more inclusive? And what are tips or pieces of advice that you have for other aspiring autistic performers and producers who want to break into this industry?
So the advice I have is probably like, as for like the people on like the industry side, a lot of projects are very focused on the plot being about neurodiversity, which can be
Yes.
really, really, really good. But it would also be good to consider neurodiverse people for roles that are not inherently about neurodiversity, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
And then I guess my advice for people that are on the spectrum or neurodiverse trying to go into the industry is that it's competitive no matter whether or not you're neurodiverse or not.
Yep.
Because I know people that neurotypical people that have been in the acting world for a very long time, and
Mm-hmm.
they have it hard. They have it hard. So
Yep.
don't take it too personally if you're struggling, because a lot of people are struggling in Hollywood. It's all luck of the draw.
It's like the amount of people that apply for an industry and the number of jobs are so little compared to the wide range of people that are trying to apply to be in this industry. It is tough, and it's a dog eat dog world out there. But something that I do want to add too is that there's a lot of great organizations out there now that help you with so many great tools and resources that you can use, whether you want to do the entertainment industry for fun or whether you want to actually pursue it as an actual career. We have the Miracle Project that is absolutely sensational. You got, again, the Ed Asner Family Center, Spec Labs. You got Epic Players, which we're both so proud to be a part of. There's a lot of great resources and organizations out there that are now aimed for neurodiverse individuals that can connect you with different people in the industry. And it's super important that people to not throw in the towel, that it is difficult for anybody, especially in this age of social media where everyone is trying to figure out how can they become famous just by the simple click of a post button. There are so many ways to, make those dreams a reality. But, along with that also comes this reality of neurotypical or neurodiverse is just a tough industry to get into. But if you have that determination and if you have that passion to succeed, then the sky's the limit, kid.
Yeah, and
the sky's the limit.
And the best advice I could leave people with, I would say, get creative, because you never know where your skills might be useful. You may have one thing that you want to do, but then you may find that your skills are very useful in another area that you didn't even know was an option. So that's really my advice, is to always get creative and be open-minded.
Could not agree with you more, Chelsea. Could not agree with you more. I can't say it enough of just how many doors that you're helping open for other people behind the scenes or even in front of the camera to have those opportunities. And I have to say, our conversation about this and your journey will really help open a lot of doors to other people that want that chance to work behind the scenes and or in front of the camera, which is super important. My thanks to Chelsea Darnell for this really great, impactful conversation. If you like what you heard on this episode and you want to hear other episodes or stay tuned for future ones, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to this podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I'm Devin Morrissey, and I'll see you next time right here on Autistically Unapologetic.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Autistically Unapologetic with Devin Morrissey. If you like what you hear and you want to see more, don't forget to rate and subscribe to stay tuned for future episodes. Again, thanks for listening.